The wind cut through Sophia Owens like a blade as she descended the iron steps of the winter train, her worn carpet bag clutched in gloved hands that trembled more from uncertainty than cold. Behind her, laughter erupted from a group of miners gathered near the depot platform, their voices carrying cruel amusement at the sight of a woman dressed in Eastern finery stepping into the frozen landscape of Jerome, Arizona, in December of 1882. The laughter died in her throat as she looked up and saw him, a tall cowboy leaning against a weathered post, his hat pulled low against the snow that had begun to fall in earnest, and when their eyes met across that frigid space, he pushed away from the post and walked toward her with steady purpose, stopping just close enough that she could see the warmth in his blue eyes as he said, "You're right on time." Sophia's breath caught, creating a small cloud in the December air. She had expected many things when she accepted the teaching position in this Arizona mining town, but kindness was not among them. The cowboy reached for her bag without asking permission, his movements respectful but confident. "Name's Xavier Vaughn," he said, his voice carrying a Texas drawl that softened the harsh consonants. "School board asked me to meet you, Miss Owens. Town's been waiting on a teacher for near about 6 months now." "I didn't realize anyone would be meeting me," Sophia managed, acutely aware of the miners still watching from their huddle near the depot. One of them called out something she couldn't quite hear, followed by more laughter. Her cheeks burned despite the cold. Xavier's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he didn't turn toward the men. Instead, he kept his attention focused on her, as if she were the only person standing on that platform. "Pay them no mind. Most folks here got more manners than that sorry bunch. Come on, I got a wagon waiting, and we should get you settled before this snow gets worse." She followed him across the platform, her boots finding uncertain purchase on planks already slick with ice. Jerome clung to the side of Mingus Mountain like a child afraid to let go, its buildings stacked in precarious tiers that seemed to defy both gravity and common sense. Smoke rose from countless chimneys, and the distant sound of mining operations created a constant background rhythm that felt alien to someone raised in Philadelphia's orderly streets. The wagon was older but well-maintained, pulled by 2 sturdy horses that stamped their feet against the cold. Xavier helped her up onto the seat with a hand under her elbow, his touch gentle but firm, then swung himself up beside her with an ease that spoke of years in the saddle. He pulled a thick blanket from behind the seat and draped it across her lap without comment, then clicked his tongue at the horses. "Town's not much to look at," Xavier said as they started up the steep main road, "but folks are decent, mostly. Mining's the main business here, copper mostly, some silver. Gets rough on paydays, but the school's up away from the worst of it. They got you set up in a room behind the schoolhouse. It's small but clean and Mrs. Patterson from the general store has been keeping a fire going so it wouldn't be frozen solid when you arrived." Sophia pulled the blanket tighter, grateful for its warmth. "That's very kind of her, and kind of you, Mr. Vaughn, to collect me in this weather. Just Xavier, please. And it's no hardship." He glanced at her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Takes a brave woman to come out here sight unseen, especially with winter setting in. Most Eastern ladies wouldn't last a week." "I'm not most Eastern ladies," Sophia said, surprised by the defiance in her own voice. Xavier's smile was slow and genuine, transforming his weather-beaten face into something approaching handsome. "I'm starting to see that." They rode in companionable silence for several minutes, the wagon wheels crunching through snow that was accumulating faster than Sophia had anticipated. Buildings pressed close on either side of the narrow street, most of them rough wood construction with false fronts that tried to project more prosperity than actually existed. Saloons seemed to outnumber legitimate businesses 3-1, and through their swinging doors, she caught glimpses of men hunched over cards and drinks, seeking warmth and forgetfulness in equal measure. "How long have you been in Jerome?" Sophia asked, more to distract herself from the treacherous road than from genuine curiosity. "Going on 5 years now. Came up from Texas after my father's ranch went under during a drought. Worked the mines for a spell, but I couldn't stomach being underground all day. Now I run cattle on some grazing land north of town, supply beef to the mining company and some of the bigger boarding houses. It's not the life I planned, but it's honest work." There was no bitterness in his voice, only acceptance of the hand life had dealt him. Sophia found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings with the alertness of a man who had learned not to take safety for granted. He couldn't have been much older than 30, she guessed, though the sun and wind had etched lines around his eyes that made precise assessment difficult. "What about you?" Xavier asked. "What brings a Philadelphia schoolteacher all the way to Arizona territory?" Sophia hesitated, weighing how much truth to share with this stranger who nevertheless felt oddly trustworthy. "My father died 6 months ago. He was a professor at the university, very respected in his field. After his death, I discovered that his debts were considerable. The house had to be sold, and I found myself without prospects or family willing to take me in. A teaching position in Jerome wasn't my first choice, but it was my only choice." "I'm sorry about your father," Xavier said, and she could hear the sincerity in his voice. "But speaking selfishly, I'm glad those circumstances brought you here. The children need someone who actually cares about their education, not just someone collecting a paycheck until something better comes along. You have children." The question came out before she could stop it, and Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks again. "No, no wife or children, but I see the kids around town, running wild because there's nobody to give them proper schooling. Some of them are bright as polished silver, but they're going to end up in the mines like their fathers because nobody ever taught them there might be another way." The passion in his voice surprised her. Most men she had known in Philadelphia viewed education as a necessary evil at best, something to be endured rather than celebrated. Xavier spoke about it the way her father had, as if learning itself held intrinsic value beyond mere economic advancement. The schoolhouse appeared through the swirling snow like a promise, a simple rectangular building with a pitched roof and a small bell tower. It was painted white, or had been once, though the paint was weathered and peeling in places. A narrow path had been shoveled from the road to the front door, and smoke indeed rose from the chimney. Xavier brought the wagon to a stop and jumped down, then came around to help Sophia descend. This time, his hands circled her waist as he lifted her down, and for a moment they stood close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body despite the layers of clothing between them. "Thank you," she managed, stepping back quickly. If Xavier noticed her discomfort, he gave no sign. He retrieved her bag and a trunk that had been secured in the wagon bed, then led her around to a side door. "This opens right into your quarters. The school room is through that door there. Mrs. Patterson should have left you some supplies, and I'll make sure firewood gets delivered every few days." The room was indeed small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a dresser, a small table with 2 chairs, and a wood stove that radiated blessed heat. But it was clean, as Xavier had promised, and someone had placed a vase of dried wildflowers on the table, a small gesture of welcome that made Sophia's throat tighten unexpectedly. Xavier set her trunk down at the foot of the bed and placed her carpet bag on the dresser. "I should let you get settled. School starts at 8 tomorrow morning, though I'd be surprised if all the students show up on the first day. They'll be testing you, seeing what they can get away with. Don't let them push you around, but don't be too harsh either. Most of them have hard lives already." "I'll do my best," Sophia said. Xavier paused at the door, his hand on the knob, then turned back to her. "If you need anything at all, my place is about 2 miles north of town, off the main road. White house with a red barn, you can't miss it. Or you can leave word at Patterson's store. I check there most days." "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question escaped before she could censor it, born of too many disappointments and too much suspicion learned in the months since her father's death. Xavier met her gaze steadily. "Because kindness costs nothing, and because I meant what I said. You're brave to come here, and brave people deserve support, not mockery." He tipped his hat. "Welcome to Jerome, Miss Owens. I hope it treats you better than you're expecting." Then he was gone, his boots crunching through the snow as he returned to his wagon. Sophia stood at the small window and watched him drive away, his figure gradually disappearing into the white curtain of falling snow. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and wondered what she had gotten herself into, coming to this wild place where miners laughed at Eastern ladies and cowboys spoke about education with passion in their voices. That night, alone in her small room with the wind howling around the schoolhouse walls, Sophia unpacked her few belongings and tried not to think about everything she had left behind. The photograph of her father in its silver frame went on the dresser. Her books, precious cargo that had taken up half her trunk, were arranged on the small shelf someone had built into the wall. Her teaching supplies, carefully hoarded from her father's study, filled the drawer of the table. Sleep came reluctantly, full of dreams about blue eyes and steady hands, about laughter that cut like knives and kindness that arrived unexpected. When morning light finally filtered through the window, pale and cold, Sophia rose with determination settling into her bones. She had not come all this way to fail. The schoolroom was larger than she had expected, with space for perhaps 20 students if they squeezed in tight. Desks of various sizes and states of repair were arranged in rough rows, and a blackboard dominated the front wall, its surface scarred but serviceable. A teacher's desk stood to one side, and Sophia took her place behind it, arranging her materials with hands that trembled only slightly. The first student arrived at 7:15, a girl of perhaps 10 with dark hair braided so tightly it pulled at her temples. She stopped in the doorway, eyes wide, then slowly entered and took a seat in the back row without speaking. Others followed in ones and twos. A pair of boys who looked to be brothers, both tow-headed and freckled. 3 girls who entered together, whispering and casting curious glances at Sophia. An older boy, perhaps 15, with the build of someone who had already spent time working hard labor. By the time the church bell rang 8 times, 14 children sat in the schoolroom, silent and watchful. Sophia stood, smoothing her skirt, and walked to the front of the room. "Good morning. My name is Miss Owens, and I'm very pleased to meet all of you. I come from Philadelphia, which is very different from Jerome, and I expect I have as much to learn from you as you do from me." The silence continued, heavy with skepticism. The older boy in the back leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. One of the whispering girls giggled, then covered her mouth. "I know you've been without a teacher for some time," Sophia continued, refusing to let their silence intimidate her. "So I thought we might start by each of you telling me your name, your age, and one thing you'd like to learn this year. Who would like to go first?" More silence. Then, tentatively, the dark-haired girl who had arrived first raised her hand. "I'm Rose. I'm 9. I want to learn to read better." "That's wonderful, Rose. Reading is one of the most important skills you'll ever develop." The ice broken. Other students began to volunteer their names and goals. The brothers were Thomas and William, ages 11 and 9, and they wanted to learn mathematics because their father said it would help them get better jobs than just swinging a pickaxe. The three whispering girls were Sarah, Margaret, and Elizabeth, all around 12, and they wanted to learn about history and faraway places. The older boy was called Daniel, and when his turn came, he said flatly, "I'm 16 and I'm only here because my mother threatened to tan my hide if I didn't give school one more try. I don't see the point in learning things that won't help me in the mines." Sophia met his challenging gaze without flinching. "Then perhaps we should make sure you learn things that will help you, Daniel. Can you calculate ore yields and profit margins? Do you understand the mechanical principles that keep mines from collapsing? Education isn't just about books and poetry. It's about understanding how the world works so you can make your own choices instead of letting others make them for you." Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, surprise maybe, or the first stirring of interest. He didn't respond, but he sat up a little straighter, his arms uncrossing. The morning passed more quickly than Sophia had anticipated. She assessed reading levels and mathematical abilities, discovering a wide range of competencies. Rose, despite being only 9, read at a level that would have been respectable in Philadelphia. Thomas and William could barely write their own names, but demonstrated a natural aptitude for numbers. The older students clustered in the middle, neither exceptional nor hopeless, simply underserved by the absence of consistent instruction. At noon, she dismissed them for lunch and they scattered like leaves in wind. Sophia returned to her room to eat the simple meal she had prepared from supplies Mrs. Patterson had indeed left, bread and cheese and dried apples. She was just finishing when a knock sounded at the door. Xavier stood on the threshold, hat in hand, snow dusting his shoulders. "Didn't mean to disturb you. I was passing by and thought I'd check how your first morning went." "It went well, I think. The children are wary, but they seem willing to learn." That's more than the last teacher could say. He spent most of his time in the saloons and barely bothered to show up at all. School board finally ran him off last summer. Sophia felt a flash of anger on behalf of the children. "That's inexcusable." "I thought so too. That's why I volunteered to meet your train. Wanted to make sure you got a proper welcome to balance out the improper ones." Xavier glanced past her into the small room. "I brought you something, if you don't mind. It's in the wagon." Curious, Sophia followed him outside. The snow had stopped temporarily, leaving the world crystallized and bright. Xavier reached into the wagon bed and pulled out a wooden crate filled with vegetables, potatoes and carrots and onions, along with a package wrapped in brown paper. "From my ranch," he explained. "The vegetables are from my root cellar, and the package is beef. Fresh butchered just yesterday. I figured the school board probably isn't paying you enough to eat well and you can't teach on an empty stomach." Sophia stared at the crate, overwhelmed by the generosity. "I can't accept this." "It's too much." "Sure you can. Consider it payment for teaching the children properly. I don't have kids of my own, but I care about this town's future, and these kids are that future." Xavier set the crate just inside her door, then tipped his hat. "I'll be by next week with more firewood. If you need anything before then, remember, leave word at Patterson's." He was in the wagon and moving before Sophia could formulate a proper thank you, leaving her standing in the doorway with a crate of provisions and a growing sense that Xavier Vaughn was unlike any man she had ever known. The afternoon session went as well as the morning, And when Sophia finally dismissed the students at 3 o'clock, she felt cautiously optimistic about her new position. She spent the remaining daylight hours preparing lessons for the following day, working by the light of the stove until her eyes grew tired and her hand cramped from writing. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Wake before dawn, prepare lessons, teach from 8 until 3, then spend evenings grading work and planning for tomorrow. The children began to warm to her, slowly shedding their wariness like outgrown coats. Rose proved to be a voracious reader, devouring every book Sophia could provide. Thomas and William turned mathematics into a friendly competition, each trying to solve problems faster than the other. Even Daniel began to participate, especially when Sophia made good on her promise to teach practical applications of education. Xavier appeared regularly, always with a reasonable excuse. He brought firewood on Thursdays. He stopped by to report messages from the school board. He invited her to Sunday services at the small church that served Jerome's Protestant population, then drove her there in his wagon because the walk would have been treacherous on icy roads. It was after one such service, as January gave way to February, that Xavier asked if she might like to see his ranch. "Nothing fancy," he said, helping her into the wagon with hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. "But I'm proud of what I've built, and I thought you might enjoy getting out of town for a few hours. The fresh air and open space can be healing when you've been cooped up all week." Sophia knew she should decline. A proper woman didn't go alone to a bachelor's home, not if she valued her reputation. But Jerome was not Philadelphia, and she was tired of living according to rules that seemed increasingly arbitrary and confining. "I'd like that," she said, and felt a thrill of rebellion at her own boldness. Xavier's ranch sat in a valley carved between mountains, protected from the worst winds by the surrounding terrain. The house was indeed white, with a wraparound porch that promised pleasant evenings in warmer weather. The red barn was large and well-maintained, and she could see cattle grazing in distant pastures, dark shapes against snow-covered ground. Inside, the house was surprisingly neat for a bachelor's dwelling. The main room held a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture that showed signs of use but not neglect, and bookshelves that immediately caught Sophia's attention. "You read," she said, surprised despite herself. Xavier shrugged, a hint of self-consciousness crossing his features. "My mother was a teacher before she married my father. She made sure I got proper schooling, even on the ranch. These are mostly hers, books she left me when she passed. I add to the collection when I can." Sophia moved closer, examining titles: poetry by Whitman and Dickinson, essays by Emerson, novels by Hawthorne and Melville. It was a collection that would have been respectable in any educated household back east. "You can borrow any you like," Xavier offered. "I know you've gone through your own books with the students. Fresh material might be welcome." "You're always giving me things," Sophia said, turning to face him. "Provisions, firewood, books. You barely know me." "Why?" Xavier met her gaze, and something shifted in the air between them, a tension that had been building since that first moment on the train platform. "I think you know why," he said quietly. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm here to teach. I can't afford complications. Teaching doesn't mean you have to be alone. In Philadelphia, a woman who kept company with a man unchaperoned would be ruined socially. I may not have much, but I have my position, and I can't risk losing it." Xavier took a step closer, not touching her but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him, see the gold flecks in his blue eyes. "This isn't Philadelphia. People here judge by different standards. They care whether you're honest and hardworking and decent to your neighbors. They don't much care who you take rides with on Sunday afternoons." Daniel's mother might care, or Sarah's father. All it would take is one parent deciding I'm not a proper influence on their children. You're right, Xavier acknowledged, though disappointment clouded his expression. He stepped back, giving her space. I don't want to make things difficult for you, but I won't apologize for wanting to spend time with you either. You're intelligent and brave and kind, and I've thought about you every day since I saw you step off that train. The honesty in his voice threatened to undo her resolve. Sophia closed her eyes, trying to remember all the sensible reasons she should maintain her distance, but they seemed flimsy against the reality of her loneliness and the genuine connection she felt with this man. Perhaps we could continue as we have been, she heard herself say. You bring firewood, I happen to be available when you arrive. You drive me to church, which is simply practical given the roads. If we happen to talk during these encounters, well, that's only natural. When she opened her eyes, Xavier was watching her with an expression of such tender understanding that it made her chest ache. I can work with that arrangement, he said. For now. The spring thaw came late to Jerome, winter clinging to the mountains with stubborn determination. But by mid-March, the snow had retreated enough that Sophia could walk to town without fear of breaking her ankle on hidden ice. She made regular trips to Patterson's general store for supplies, and it was there that she began to understand the fabric of the community she had joined. Mrs. Patterson was a round woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a kind heart. She knew everything that happened in Jerome, and she shared information freely with those she liked. Sophia apparently made that select list, because Mrs. Patterson took to sharing gossip and advice in equal measure. That Xavier Vaughn is sweet on you, Mrs. Patterson announced one Saturday as Sophia selected vegetables. The whole town can see it. Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. He's been very kind in helping me settle here. Kind, Mrs. Patterson repeated with a knowing smile. That's one word for it. He's a good man, that one. Lost everything when his family's ranch failed, but he didn't let it make him bitter. Came here and built something new from nothing. That takes character. I'm not looking for a husband, Mrs. Patterson. I have my teaching to focus on. Pshaw. A woman can teach and keep company at the same time. Don't let fear keep you from happiness, dear. Life's too short and too hard out here to turn away good things when they come along. The words stayed with Sophia as she walked back to the schoolhouse, her basket heavy with purchases. Was she letting fear control her? Fear of losing her position, yes, but also deeper fears. Fear of depending on someone and being disappointed. Fear of caring and losing the way she had lost her father. Fear of being vulnerable in a world that had proven itself untrustworthy. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the group of men gathered outside the saloon until one of them stepped into her path. It was one of the miners from the train platform, the ones who had laughed at her arrival. Up close, he smelled of whiskey and sweat, and his eyes held a mean gleam. Well, if it isn't the fancy teacher lady, he said, his words slightly slurred. Too good to talk to working men, are you? Sophia's grip tightened on her basket. Excuse me, please. Excuse me, please, he mimicked in a high voice. His companions laughed. You hear that, boys? She wants to be excused. Let her pass, Miller. The voice came from behind the miner, and Sophia saw Daniel, her oldest student, standing with his fists clenched at his sides. He looked young and scared but determined. Miller turned, swaying slightly. This ain't your concern, boy. Miss Owens is my teacher. That makes it my concern. The situation balanced on a knife's edge, tension crackling in the air. Then another voice cut through, cold and authoritative. There's a problem here. Xavier stood at the edge of the group, and though he hadn't raised his voice or made any threatening gesture, every man there took an involuntary step back. His hand rested casually on his hip, near where Sophia knew he carried a revolver, and his blue eyes had gone hard as winter ice. "No problem," Miller muttered. "Just having a conversation. Looked like you were blocking Miss Owens's path." Conversations work better when both parties want to participate. Xavier moved to Sophia's side, not quite touching her but establishing his presence unmistakably. "Why don't you boys head back inside and sleep off whatever you've been drinking?" Miller opened his mouth as if to argue, then thought better of it. He and his companions shuffled back into the saloon, their mutters fading as the doors swung shut. "Thank you," Sophia said, her voice shakier than she would have liked. "Both of you." Daniel ducked his head, embarrassed by the attention. "I couldn't just stand by and let them bother you, Miss Owens. You've been good to me, better than I deserved after how I acted that first day." Sophia felt a surge of affection for the boy who had been so challenging at the start. "You've grown into a fine student, Daniel, and a fine young man. Your mother should be proud." Daniel's ears turned red, but he was clearly pleased. He mumbled something about needing to get home and hurried off, leaving Sophia alone with Xavier. "That's twice now you've rescued me," she said, trying to keep her tone light despite the tremor in her hands. "I don't think you needed much rescuing. Daniel had the situation in hand." Xavier took her basket, adding it to his own supplies. "But I'll walk you back anyway if you don't mind. Just to make sure there's no more trouble." They walked in silence for a few minutes, climbing the steep street toward the schoolhouse. Finally, Xavier said, "I meant what I said that day at my ranch. I think about you all the time, Sophia. I know you're worried about propriety and your position, and I respect that. But I need you to know that my intentions are entirely honorable. I'm not looking for a dalliance or a way to pass time. I'm looking for someone to build a life with." Sophia stopped walking, her heart pounding. They stood alone on the street, the schoolhouse visible in the distance. "Xavier, I don't know if I can be what you're looking for. My father's death taught me how quickly everything can fall apart. I'm afraid of depending on anyone again. I understand that fear. When my family lost the ranch, I thought my world had ended. Everything I'd assumed about my future just vanished overnight." Xavier set down their baskets and turned to face her fully. "But I learned that people are stronger than they think. You proved that by coming here, by building a new life in a strange place. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. I don't feel strong. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding everything together. That's what strength is, though. It's not about never being scared or uncertain. It's about keeping going anyway." Xavier reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, and the contact sent electricity racing up her arm. "I'm not asking you to make any promises right now. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe we could build something good together. Let me court you properly, with the whole town knowing my intentions. Let me show you that not everyone leaves or disappoints." Sophia looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. She saw hope there, and patience, and a tenderness that made her breath catch. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something other than fear about the future. She felt possibility. "All right," she said softly. "You can court me. But slowly, Xavier, I need time." His smile was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. "We've got all the time in the world." News of Xavier's courtship spread through Jerome faster than wildfire through dry brush. Sophia had expected censure, or at least disapproval from the parents of her students, but instead, she found acceptance. Mrs. Patterson beamed whenever she saw them together. Mothers nodded approvingly when Xavier picked Sophia up after school. Even the school board chairman, a gruff former miner named Mr. Thompson, expressed his satisfaction. "Good match. he told Sophia after a school board meeting in late April. Vaughn's got a solid head on his shoulders and a good reputation. You could do a lot worse, especially out here where decent men are outnumbered 10-1. The attention made Sophia uncomfortable at first, but she gradually adjusted to the reality that Jerome operated by different social rules than Philadelphia. Here, a woman's worth wasn't measured by how carefully she observed arbitrary restrictions, but by her contributions to the community and her personal character. Xavier courted her with a patience and creativity that surprised her. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows near his ranch, small bouquets that she displayed on her teaching desk, until the students teased her gently about them. He carved her a set of bookends shaped like horses, their details so precise she could see individual muscles and flowing manes. He took her on long drives through the surrounding countryside, showing her hidden valleys and ancient rock formations, sharing the landscape he had come to love. In return, Sophia introduced him to worlds contained in books. They spent evenings on his porch as spring finally conquered winter, reading aloud to each other. She discovered he had a gift for dramatic interpretation, bringing characters to life with different voices and inflections. He discovered she could explain complex philosophical concepts in ways that made them accessible and relevant to practical life. "You should have been a professor like your father," Xavier said one evening in May as the sun painted the mountains gold and crimson. "I'm happy teaching children," Sophia replied. "I think I can do more good here than I ever could have in a university. The children are lucky to have you. Daniel told me you've been helping him study for the territorial teacher's exam. He wants to become a teacher himself now." Sophia felt a glow of pride. Daniel had transformed from a sullen, resistant student to one of her most dedicated pupils. He had a gift for connecting with younger children and explaining concepts in ways they understood. He'll make an excellent teacher. He has empathy and patience, and he remembers what it's like to struggle with learning. That's your influence. You see potential in people and help them see it in themselves. Xavier reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand, a gesture that had become comfortable and familiar over the past weeks. "You do that for me too, you know. Make me believe I could be more than just a rancher scratching out a living. You already are more than that. You're thoughtful and educated and kind. You contribute to this community in a dozen different ways. Then we bring out the best in each other," Xavier said. "That seems like a good foundation for a life together." Sophia's pulse quickened. They hadn't yet spoken explicitly about marriage, though the intention hung unspoken in every conversation. "Are you asking me something, Xavier Vaughn?" "Not yet. I want to do it right when the timing is perfect. But I want you to know I'm planning to ask, so it won't come as a complete surprise when I do." The prospect should have terrified her, should have triggered all her careful defenses against vulnerability and dependence. Instead, Sophia felt a sense of rightness settling into her bones. This man, this place, this life they were building together, it all felt like pieces finally clicking into place. The school year ended in mid-June with a community celebration. Parents and students gathered in the schoolhouse to demonstrate what they had learned. Rose read a passage from Shakespeare with such expression that several mothers dabbed at their eyes. Thomas and William solved complex mathematics problems on the blackboard. The younger students performed a play Sophia had written about Arizona's history, their earnest performances earning enthusiastic applause. Daniel stood at the end and announced his intention to attend the Territorial Normal School in Prescott, training to become a teacher himself. His mother cried openly, and his father, a gruff miner who rarely showed emotion, gripped his son's shoulder with obvious pride. As the families departed and Sophia began cleaning up, Xavier appeared in the doorway. He wore his best clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with a string tie, his hair still damp from obvious recent washing. "I thought you might need help," he said, but his eyes suggested he had other purposes in mind. They worked together in companionable silence, straightening desks and gathering discarded papers. When the room was finally restored to order, Xavier took Sophia's hand and led her outside. The June evening was perfect, warm but not hot, with a breeze carrying the scent of pine from the mountains. "Walk with me?" Xavier asked, though it wasn't really a question. They wandered away from the schoolhouse, following a path that led to a small overlook where Jerome spread below them in golden evening light. The mountains stretched endlessly in all directions, ancient and patient. Somewhere a bird called, its song liquid and sweet. Xavier stopped at the overlook and turned to face her, still holding her hand. "I've been thinking about what to say for weeks now, practicing in my head. But now that the moment's here, all those careful words seem inadequate." Sophia's heart hammered so hard she was certain he must hear it. "Xavier, let me get this out before I lose my nerve." He took a breath, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "When you stepped off that train 6 months ago, I felt like I'd been waiting my whole life without knowing what I was waiting for. You were so brave and scared at the same time, trying not to show it but unable to quite hide it. And when you looked at me, I knew. I just knew you were going to change everything." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. She had never heard such raw honesty, such vulnerability from a man. "These months with you have been the best of my life," Xavier continued. "You make me want to be better, do more, reach higher. You've shown me that strength comes in forms I never recognized before. You've taught me that building something new can be even better than preserving something old." He released her hand and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. "Sophia Owens, I love you more than I have words to express. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here in Jerome, teaching our community's children and coming home every evening to the ranch we'll run together? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you happy?" He opened the box, revealing a ring. It wasn't fancy or expensive, just a simple gold band with a small diamond, but it was the most beautiful thing Sophia had ever seen because of what it represented. Hope, future, partnership. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Xavier, I'll marry you." His smile could have lit the darkening sky. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for her hand. Then he pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, burying her face in his chest as his arms closed around her. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other as the sun completed its descent, and stars began to emerge overhead. Sophia felt something inside her that had been locked tight since her father's death finally open, allowing warmth and hope to flood in. "I love you," she said against his chest. "I don't know when it happened, maybe that first day when you looked at me like I mattered, like I was exactly what you'd been hoping for, but I love you completely." Xavier's arms tightened around her. "Then we'll face everything else together. Whatever comes, we'll handle it as a team." It was both a statement and a promise, and Sophia believed him absolutely. They were married in late July in the small church where Xavier had taken her that first Sunday. The ceremony was simple but well attended, with most of Jerome's population cramming into the building or standing outside in the summer heat. Mrs. Patterson cried through the entire service. Daniel attended with his family, grinning proudly as if he had personally arranged the match. Sophia's students had pooled their allowances to buy a gift, a set of embroidered pillowcases that showed more enthusiasm than skill, but touched her deeply nonetheless. Sophia wore a simple dress of pale blue, the finest she could afford on her teacher's salary. Xavier wore his good suit, the same one he had worn the evening he proposed, and when he looked at her during the ceremony, his eyes held such love and promise that she had to blink back tears. The reception was held at Xavier's ranch, the house and barn thrown open to accommodate guests. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by neighbors. A fiddle player provided music, and couples danced on the grass, their laughter carrying on the warm evening air. As the sun set and their guests began to depart, Xavier led Sophia inside the house that was now officially hers as well. He had spent the past weeks making improvements, adding feminine touches to the bachelor space. New curtains hung in the windows. A larger bed filled the bedroom, replacing the narrow bunk he had used before. Fresh paint brightened the walls, and everywhere she looked, Sophia saw evidence of his care and thoughtfulness. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vaughn," Xavier said, and the name sent a thrill through her. Their wedding night was tender and awkward and perfect, two people learning each other's rhythms and preferences, building intimacy through patience and humor and genuine affection. Xavier was gentle and attentive, concerned always with her comfort and pleasure. Sophia discovered that physical love could be an extension of emotional connection, not the cold duty she had been led to believe by her Philadelphia upbringing. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds through open windows. Xavier's hand traced patterns on her shoulder, and Sophia felt more at peace than she could remember being. "No regrets?" Xavier asked quietly. "None. You? How could I regret the best decision I've ever made?" He kissed her forehead. "I know this has all happened fast. We've only known each other 7 months, but I want you to know that I'm committed to this to us for the long haul. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together." "I believe you," Sophia said, and she did. The summer passed in a glow of newlywed happiness. Sophia had the months free from teaching, and she used them to transform the ranch house into a true home. She planted a garden, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil. She rearranged furniture and hung pictures, and gradually added her possessions to Xavier's, until the house reflected both their personalities. Xavier taught her to ride, patiently coaching her through her initial fear of the horses. By August, she could ride well enough to accompany him when he checked on his cattle, and they spent long days together in the mountains, working side by side and talking about everything and nothing. In the evenings, they continued their tradition of reading together, but now they sat close on the porch swing Xavier had built, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Sometimes they would pause in the reading to simply watch the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, marveling at the beauty of the landscape they called home. It was during one such evening in late August that Sophia realized she hadn't experienced her monthly courses in some time. She did the mental arithmetic, counting back, and her breath caught. She said nothing that evening, wanting to be certain before sharing her suspicions, but over the next week other signs appeared. Morning queasiness that passed by midday, unusual fatigue, a sensitivity to smells that had never bothered her before. Finally, she sought out Mrs. Patterson, who had raised 5 children and had the practical wisdom that came from experience. The older woman took one look at Sophia's face and began to smile. "You're expecting, aren't you, dear?" Sophia nodded, torn between joy and terror. "I think so. I'm not completely certain, but the signs seem to point that way." "Then congratulations. A baby is a blessing, especially for a couple as well matched as you and Xavier." Mrs. Patterson patted her hand. "I know it can be frightening, bringing a child into this world, but you're strong and healthy, and Xavier will take excellent care of you. When do you think it might arrive?" Sophia did more mental calculations. Late March or early April, I think. I'll need to arrange a temporary teacher for the school, at least for a few weeks. Don't you worry about that. The school board will understand. They're lucky to have you at all, baby or no baby. That evening, Sophia made Xavier's favorite meal and tried to find the right moment to share her news. Xavier seemed to sense her nervousness, asking several times if everything was all right. Finally, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Sophia decided to simply be direct. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. "I'm fairly certain I'm pregnant. The baby should arrive in late March." For a moment, Xavier simply stared at her, processing. Then his face split into a grin of such pure joy that Sophia started laughing. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she were suddenly made of glass. "A baby," he breathed. "We're going to have a baby." "You're happy?" "Happy? Sophia, I'm beyond happy. I'm ecstatic. Terrified, but ecstatic." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. "Are you all right? How do you feel? Do you need anything?" "I'm fine, just a little queasy in the mornings." "Xavier, are we ready for this? We've only been married a month." "Nobody's ever really ready," Xavier said, "but we'll figure it out together the way we figure everything out. Our child is going to be so loved, Sophia. So incredibly loved." The pregnancy proceeded normally, though Sophia found teaching while dealing with morning sickness required determination. Her students were solicitous once word spread, bringing her water and offering to help with tasks that required bending or heavy lifting. Daniel, now officially enrolled in the normal school but visiting home regularly, was particularly protective, scolding younger students who got too rambunctious near her. Xavier hovered anxiously, trying not to be overprotective but unable to help himself. He insisted on driving her to and from school every day, even though the walk was short. He read every book on pregnancy and childbirth he could acquire, ordering volumes from as far away as San Francisco. He transformed the smallest bedroom into a nursery, building a cradle by hand and painting the walls a cheerful yellow. Winter returned to Jerome, and with it came the familiar cold and snow. Sophia continued teaching through December, but by January, the physical demands became too much. She reluctantly turned her classroom over to a temporary replacement, a young woman from Prescott who was competent, if uninspiring. The final months of pregnancy were simultaneously the longest and shortest of Sophia's life. Time dragged when she was uncomfortable and restless, unable to find a position that didn't cause some ache or pain. But it also flew past in a blur of preparation, of washing tiny clothes and organizing supplies, and trying to prepare mentally for the enormous change approaching. Xavier was her rock throughout, patient and supportive and unfailingly optimistic. When she woke in the night uncomfortable and unable to sleep, he stayed awake with her, reading to her or simply talking until exhaustion finally claimed her. When she became emotional over trivial things, a side effect of pregnancy she hadn't anticipated, he held her and assured her that everything was normal and all right. The contractions began on a cold morning in late March, subtle at first, barely distinguishable from the other aches and pains that had become constant companions. But they gradually intensified, and by afternoon, Sophia knew their baby was coming. Xavier sent for the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson who had delivered most of Jerome's babies over the past decade, then stayed by Sophia's side, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. Labor was hard, harder than Sophia had imagined despite all her reading and preparation. Hours blurred together in waves of pain and effort. Xavier never left, his presence a constant anchor when she felt like she might be swept away. He wiped her forehead with cool cloths, spoke encouraging words, and let her squeeze his hand hard enough to leave bruises. Finally, as sunset painted the windows gold and crimson, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that proclaimed his displeasure at the transition. Mrs. Henderson cleaned him efficiently, then placed the squirming bundle in Sophia's arms. Sophia looked down at the tiny face, the miniature features already so clearly a blend of her and Xavier, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known possible. This was her son, hers and Xavier's, a living embodiment of their love and commitment. "He's perfect," Xavier whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out with one finger to touch the baby's impossibly small hand, and their son grasped it instinctively, holding on with surprising strength. "What should we name him?" Sophia asked. They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything definite, waiting to meet their child before making a final decision. Now, looking at his face, Sophia knew. "Samuel," she said. "After my father," Xavier nodded, tears tracking down his cheeks unashamed. "Samuel Vaughn. It's a good, strong name." Recovery from childbirth took longer than Sophia had anticipated. The first weeks passed in an exhausting blur of feeding and changing and trying to sleep whenever Samuel did. Xavier helped in every way possible, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with their son when he was fussy, bringing Sophia meals when she was too tired to leave bed. The community rallied around them as well. Mrs. Patterson arrived with casseroles and advice. Former students visited, cooing over the baby and offering to help with chores. Daniel, home from school for a break, took over feeding Xavier's cattle so Xavier could stay close to the house. By the time April arrived and the snow began its retreat, Sophia had adjusted to motherhood and felt ready to contemplate returning to teaching. Samuel was a good baby, sleeping in longer stretches and settling into a predictable routine. She arranged with Mrs. Henderson to watch him during school hours, and in late April, she returned to her classroom. The students greeted her with enthusiasm, presenting her with drawings they had made during her absence, and clamoring to hear about the baby. She told them edited stories about Samuel's arrival and early weeks, making them laugh with tales of his unexpected diaper disasters and middle-of-the-night concerts. Life settled into a new rhythm, more complex than before, but no less satisfying. Sophia taught during the day and hurried home in the afternoons to nurse Samuel and help Xavier with ranch work. Evenings were spent as a family, the three of them together in the house that had become a true home. Xavier continued building his business, expanding his herd and taking on new contracts. Sophia continued teaching, inspiring another generation of Jerome's children to imagine lives beyond the mines. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, his personality emerged. He was curious and fearless, exploring everything within reach with hands that moved faster than either parent could anticipate. He had Xavier's blue eyes and Sophia's dark hair, and his smile could light up a room. Xavier proved to be a devoted father, including Samuel in ranch work as soon as the boy could walk, teaching him about horses and cattle with patient enthusiasm. On Samuel's second birthday, as they celebrated with cake and a handful of close friends, Xavier pulled Sophia aside on the porch. "Happy?" he asked, the question that had become a touchstone between them. "Deliriously," Sophia answered honestly. She looked through the window at their son, who was attempting to blow out his candles with more enthusiasm than accuracy. "I never imagined I could have this, Xavier. A home, a family, work that matters, a partner who truly sees me. When I stepped off that train 3 years ago, I thought I was just running from failure. I didn't realize I was running toward everything I'd ever need." Xavier wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I knew the moment I saw you. You were exactly right on time, exactly what I'd been waiting for without realizing I was waiting." They stood together watching their son, their friends, their life, and Sophia sent silent thanks to whatever forces had brought her to this moment. The journey had been unexpected, taking her far from everything familiar, but it had led her exactly where she belonged. The years continued to unfold with the measured pace of seasons. Samuel was joined by a sister, Lily, born in the spring of 1886 when he was 3. The addition of a daughter completed their family in ways Sophia hadn't known were incomplete. Lily was quieter than her brother, more contemplative, with Xavier's thoughtful nature and Sophia's love of books. By age 4, she could already sound out simple words, and Sophia knew she would be reading fluently long before she officially started school. Xavier expanded the ranch house, adding rooms to accommodate their growing family. He built Sophia a study where she could prepare lessons and grade papers without interruption. He constructed a larger porch where they could all gather in the evenings, watching the sunset while the children played. Sophia continued teaching, becoming an institution in Jerome. Students who had learned under her instruction began sending their own children to her classroom. Daniel returned after completing his education and took a teaching position in nearby Prescott, citing Sophia as his primary inspiration. Other former students went on to unexpected successes, becoming engineers and merchants and nurses, living lives they had never imagined possible before Sophia showed them their own potential. The mining town evolved around them, becoming more permanent and established. Roads improved. More businesses opened. A telegraph line finally connected Jerome to the wider world, bringing news from distant places in minutes rather than weeks. But through all the changes, some things remained constant. The mountains still embraced the town with patient strength. The winters still arrived cold and fierce. And the sense of community, of neighbors depending on each other for survival and support, remained as strong as ever. In the summer of 1890, Xavier and Sophia celebrated their 8th anniversary with a quiet dinner after the children had been put to bed. They sat on the porch in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Xavier asked. Sophia considered the question seriously. Did she miss the city of her birth with its culture and sophistication and rigid social structures? Perhaps occasionally she felt a twinge of nostalgia for certain aspects, the museums and concerts and easy access to books. But miss it as a whole? Want to return to that life? No, she said firmly. Philadelphia was where I came from, but Jerome is my home. This ranch is my home. You and our children are my home. Everything that matters to me is right here. Even after all the hardships, the difficult winters, the isolation, the struggles, especially because of those things, the challenges have made our life here real and meaningful. We've built something solid together, something that will last. She squeezed his hand. What about you? Do you ever regret losing your father's ranch in Texas? That ranch was his dream, not mine, Xavier said. Losing it forced me to figure out what I actually wanted, not what I thought I should want. And it brought me here to you, to this life we've created. How could I regret anything that led to this? They sat in contentment, listening to the night sounds that had become as familiar as breathing. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its voice lonely and wild. Closer, an owl hooted from the barn, hunting for mice. Inside the house, the children slept safely, their futures full of possibility. "I've been thinking," Sophia said slowly, "about expanding the school. We're outgrowing the current building, and there are children in the outlying areas who can't attend because the distance is too far. What if we started a secondary school? Something for the older students who want more education but can't afford to go to Prescott or Tucson. Xavier turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting starlight. That's ambitious. Would the school board approve? I think they might, especially if we could show community support. The mining company might contribute. They've been complaining about the difficulty of finding educated workers for management positions. And I know several families who would help with construction if materials could be provided. You'd need more teachers. Daniel might be willing to relocate from Prescott, and there are others, graduates from the normal schools looking for positions. Jerome is growing, Xavier. We need to grow our educational opportunities along with everything else. Xavier was silent for a long moment, thinking. Then he nodded. Let's do it. I can contribute lumber and labor, and I know other ranchers and business owners who would likely help if approached properly. If you organize the educational side, I'll handle the fundraising and construction. It was exactly the response Sophia had hoped for, this immediate partnership, this assumption that her dreams were his dreams and vice versa. This was what marriage should be, she thought. Two people working together toward common goals, supporting each other's ambitions, building something larger than either could accomplish alone. The project consumed the next 2 years. Sophia presented her proposal to the school board, which approved it after spirited debate. Xavier organized a committee of local business leaders and ranchers, pooling resources and labor. The community came together in ways that reminded everyone why frontier towns survived, people setting aside differences to work toward collective benefit. The new school building rose on a plot of land donated by the mining company, a 2-story structure with 4 classrooms and a small library. It was not fancy or modern by Eastern standards, but it was solid and functional, and represented countless hours of donated labor and materials. When it opened in the fall of 1892, 15 students enrolled in the secondary program, ranging in age from 14 to 17. Daniel relocated from Prescott to teach mathematics and sciences, bringing his young wife with him. Sophia taught literature, history, and philosophy. A third teacher, a young woman fresh from normal school, handled languages and music. The school quickly became a source of community pride. Students thrived under the expanded curriculum, discovering talents and interests they had never known they possessed. Parents saw their children's futures expanding beyond the mines and ranching. The mining company found the educated workforce it needed. And Sophia felt the deep satisfaction of knowing she had created something lasting, something that would benefit Jerome for generations. Samuel started at the primary school that same fall, his enthusiasm for learning matching his mother's. He made friends easily, leading expeditions to explore the mountains and organizing games during recess. Lily, not yet old enough for formal schooling, accompanied Sophia to the classroom and absorbed everything like a sponge, already reading better than many children twice her age. Xavier's ranch prospered as well. His reputation for honesty and quality stock spread, and he began receiving contracts from mining operations throughout the territory. He hired help to manage the increased workload, bringing in 2 cowboys who lived in a bunkhouse Xavier built near the barn. The operation became one of the most successful in the region, proof that hard work and integrity could build success even in an uncertain environment. In the spring of 1894, Sophia discovered she was pregnant again. The news was unexpected, as she had assumed their family was complete with 2 children. But the surprise quickly gave way to joy, though Xavier insisted she reduce her teaching load to avoid overtaxing herself. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, perhaps because she was older or simply because she was chasing two active children while also working. Xavier worried constantly, hovering even more than he had with Samuel and Lily. Mrs. Patterson reassured them both that everything was progressing normally, but the final months dragged with uncomfortable slowness. Their third child, a son they named Thomas after one of Sophia's first and most devoted students, arrived in early December during a snowstorm that isolated the ranch for 3 days. Mrs. Henderson barely made it through the drifts in time to assist with the delivery, and she ended up staying at the ranch for a week until the roads were passable again. Thomas was a quiet baby, content to observe the world with solemn eyes. He had Sophia's dark hair and Xavier's strong features, and from the beginning, he seemed most comfortable when held close, seeking comfort in physical contact. Samuel and Lily doted on their baby brother, competing to hold him and help with his care. With 3 children, life became necessarily more chaotic. Sophia reduced her teaching to part-time, focusing on the secondary school students while younger teachers handled the primary grades. She found she didn't mind the reduction. Spending more time with her children during their early years felt like the right choice, and she could always increase her teaching load again as they grew older. Xavier hired additional help for the ranch, recognizing that his time was increasingly divided between business and family. He remained deeply involved in both, but he was careful to maintain balance, to ensure that neither work nor family suffered from neglect. The years between 1894 and 1900 passed in the rhythm that defined their lives. Children grew and learned and tested boundaries. The ranch continued to prosper. The schools thrived, sending graduates on to further education or successful careers. Xavier and Sophia's relationship deepened, moving beyond the passionate intensity of new love into something richer and more complex. A partnership tempered by shared challenges and triumphs. Jerome itself transformed during those years. The mining operations expanded, bringing more workers and more families. The town spread up and down the mountain, buildings multiplying like cells dividing. Modern conveniences arrived gradually. Electric lights replaced oil lamps in some buildings. A proper hospital opened, reducing the isolation that had made medical emergencies so frightening. Telephones connected the town to the world beyond the mountains. Through all the changes, the Vaughn family remained a constant presence. Xavier served on the town council, helping plan Jerome's growth and development. Sophia's reputation as an educator spread throughout the territory, and she received offers from larger schools in Tucson and Phoenix, offers she consistently declined. Their home was in Jerome, their roots deep in the rocky soil of Mingus Mountain. On a warm evening in June 1900, as the 20th century was still new and full of promise, the family gathered on the porch after dinner. Samuel, now 13 and growing into a young man, talked about his plans to attend the University of Arizona in Tucson when he graduated. Lily, 10 years old and already an accomplished reader, was absorbed in a novel, occasionally sharing interesting passages with whoever would listen. Thomas, 5 and perpetually curious, was examining a collection of rocks he had gathered during the day, asking Xavier detailed questions about their composition and origin. Sophia sat in the porch swing, watching her family with a contentment so deep, it was almost painful. 18 years had passed since she stepped off that winter train into uncertainty and fear. 18 years of building a life she hadn't known to hope for, of loving and being loved, of contributing to a community and raising children who would carry forward the values she and Xavier had tried to instill. Xavier settled beside her on the swing, his arm automatically circling her shoulders. The gesture was so familiar now, so comfortable that she hardly registered it consciously. But it remained meaningful nonetheless, this physical affirmation of their connection. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked quietly. "That I'm grateful for all of this, for every moment that led here." She leaned into him, drawing on his strength and warmth. "Do you remember what you said that first day, that I was right on time?" "I remember everything about that day. The way you looked, scared but trying to hide it. The way the sun caught your hair. The way you straightened your shoulders and lifted your chin when those miners laughed, refusing to let them see how much it hurt." "I was terrified," Sophia admitted. "I thought I had made a terrible mistake coming here, that I would fail at teaching and end up more lost than I already was." "But you didn't fail. You succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, including your own." "We succeeded," Sophia corrected. "I couldn't have done any of it without you. Your support, your partnership, your love. You gave me a foundation to build on when everything else felt uncertain." Xavier kissed the top of her head, a gesture of casual affection that still made her heart flutter. "We've built a good life together. A family, a home, work that matters. Not many people can say that." Samuel looked up from his conversation with Thomas, his expression thoughtful. "Dad, do you ever wish you'd done something different? Gone somewhere else instead of staying in Jerome?" Xavier considered the question seriously, giving it the respect it deserved. "I've had opportunities to leave over the years. Offers to manage larger ranches in better locations, chances to move to cities with more resources. But every time I've considered leaving, I remember why I stayed in the first place. This is where your mother is, where you kids were born, where we've built our life. Success isn't measured by how much money you make or how impressive your title sounds. It's measured by whether you're happy, whether you've made a positive difference, whether you've created something that will outlast you." "And have we?" Lily asked, looking up from her book. "Created something that will outlast us?" Sophia smiled at her daughter's perception. "I think so. The schools will continue educating children long after we're gone. The ranch will provide livelihoods for workers and food for the community. And most importantly, you three will carry forward the values we've tried to teach you, passing them on to your own children someday. That's legacy, the things that persist beyond our individual lives." Thomas, not quite understanding the philosophical turn of the conversation but wanting to participate, piped up. "I'm going to be a rancher like Dad and have lots of cows." Everyone laughed, the sound warm and affectionate. Xavier reached down and ruffled his youngest son's hair. "Then I'll teach you everything I know, partner." As darkness settled over the mountains and stars emerged in vast profusion, the family remained on the porch, talking and laughing and simply being together. Inside the house, lamps glowed golden, promising warmth and shelter. Beyond the house, the ranch spread out in ordered patterns, the result of years of careful work. And beyond the ranch, Jerome clung to the mountainside, a testament to human determination and adaptability. Sophia felt the weight of time pressing on this moment, the awareness that it was both precious and fleeting. Her children would grow up, would leave to pursue their own dreams. She and Xavier would grow older, their hair graying, their bodies slowing. Life would continue its inexorable march forward. But this moment, this perfect evening with her family surrounding her, this was what mattered. This was what she would hold in her heart forever, the culmination of 18 years of building and hoping and loving. The years that followed brought their share of challenges and sorrows. Xavier's father died in Texas, and though they had been estranged, Xavier traveled back for the funeral and returned subdued, confronting mortality in ways that sobered them both. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, leaving a hole in the community that took years to fill. The mines had accidents, as they always did, and Sophia attended too many funerals for students' fathers and brothers. But there were triumphs as well. Samuel graduated at the top of his class and earned a scholarship to the University of Arizona, where he studied agriculture with plans to return and help modernize his father's ranch. Lily published her first story in a territorial magazine at age 14, launching what would become a successful writing career. Thomas proved to have an uncanny connection with animals, gentling horses that others had given up on as untrainable. The secondary school continued to grow, adding more teachers and programs. Daniel became principal, managing the growing institution with skill and dedication. Graduates went on to universities throughout the West, returning with degrees in engineering, medicine, law, and teaching. The prophecy Sophia had seen in those early days came true. Education did provide alternatives to the mines, did expand the possibilities of what life in Jerome could be. Xavier's ranch became one of the most respected operations in Arizona territory, known for quality livestock and fair dealing. He served multiple terms on the town council, helping navigate Jerome through the challenges of growth and modernization. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Xavier was invited to the celebration in Phoenix, recognized as one of the citizens whose work had helped make statehood possible. Through everything, Xavier and Sophia remained partners in the truest sense. They faced challenges together, celebrated victories together, and built a life that was richer than either could have created alone. Their love, which had begun with a moment of connection on a frozen train platform, had deepened into something unshakable, a foundation that supported everything else in their lives. In the spring of 1920, as Sophia approached her 62nd birthday, she finally retired from teaching. It was time, she knew, though the decision came hard. Her body no longer had the energy to keep pace with young students, and she wanted to spend her remaining years focused on family and writing the educational texts she had always intended to produce. The community threw her a retirement celebration that filled the school auditorium beyond capacity. Former students, some now grandparents themselves, testified about her impact on their lives. The territorial governor sent a letter praising her decades of service. Daniel, now gray-haired himself and approaching his own retirement, gave a speech that left hardly a dry eye in the room, but it was Xavier's tribute that meant the most to her. He stood before the crowd, still tall and strong despite his 63 years, and spoke from the heart. 38 years ago, I watched a woman step off a winter train, and something told me my life was about to change. I had no idea how right that feeling was. Sophia didn't just change my life. She changed this entire community. She saw potential in children others dismissed. She built educational programs that have sent hundreds of students on to success. She showed us all what dedication and love can accomplish. But beyond all her public achievements, she's been the most wonderful wife and mother I could have imagined. She's made our house a home, raised our children to be good people, and stood beside me through every challenge and triumph. Jerome is better because she came here. I'm better because she loved me. And I'll be grateful every day for the rest of my life that she stepped off that train right on time. The applause was thunderous, but Sophia only heard her husband's words echoing in her heart. She crossed the stage to him, and they embraced while the community they had helped build cheered around them. Retirement brought new rhythms and freedoms. Sophia wrote in the mornings, producing a series of educational guides that were adopted by schools throughout Arizona. She and Xavier traveled, visiting Samuel in Tucson, where he taught at the university, staying with Lily in San Francisco, where she had moved to pursue her writing career more seriously, and spending long weeks at the ranch with Thomas, who had taken over the day-to-day operations while Xavier transitioned to advisory roles. They became grandparents, first when Samuel and his wife had twin boys, then when Thomas's wife delivered a daughter, and finally when Lily, who had married late, gave birth to a son. Xavier took to grandparenthood with enthusiasm, spoiling his grandchildren in ways he had been too practical to do with his own children. Sophia loved watching him with the little ones, seeing how his face lit up when they ran to greet him. On a warm evening in June 1925, nearly 43 years after their first meeting, Xavier and Sophia sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple. The house was quiet, the grandchildren having left after a boisterous weekend visit. Thomas was down at the barn handling evening chores. The world felt peaceful and complete. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Sophia asked, her hand finding Xavier's automatically. "All the time," Xavier admitted. "I think about how different my life would be if you hadn't taken that teaching job, if you'd gone somewhere else instead. It terrifies me to imagine. I think about the miners who laughed at me. I wonder what they thought they were seeing, what made them find my arrival so amusing. They saw someone different, someone who challenged their assumptions about what belonged in Jerome. They didn't realize they were watching the arrival of the person who would do more for this town than most of them combined." Sophia smiled, squeezing his hand. "You always did have an inflated view of my importance. It's not inflated if it's accurate." Xavier turned to look at her fully, and despite the lines time had etched on both their faces, she saw the same love in his eyes that had been there from the beginning. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Sophia Vaughn. Every day with you has been a gift. Even the difficult days, the arguments and struggles and setbacks, especially those days because they taught us how to work through problems, how to stay committed when things got hard. Anyone can love during good times. It's the difficult times that show what love really means." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day transition to night. Somewhere a coyote howled, the sound familiar and somehow comforting. Stars began to emerge, the same stars that had watched over them for more than 4 decades. "I was so scared when I stepped off that train," Sophia said softly. "I thought I was facing disaster, that I had reached the end of my options and would probably fail here too. But you didn't fail. You thrived. You built a life beyond what you could have imagined in Philadelphia. We built it together. That's what I want to make sure you understand, Xavier. None of it would have been possible without you. You gave me stability when I needed it most. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You showed me what partnership could be." Xavier raised her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "Then we saved each other. You gave my life meaning and purpose when I was just going through the motions. You showed me that losing my father's ranch wasn't the end of my story, but the beginning of something better." As darkness completed its conquest of the sky, they remained on the porch, holding hands and feeling the weight of decades between them. 3 children grown and successful. Grandchildren to carry on their legacy. A community enriched by their contributions. A love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. "No regrets?" Sophia asked, the question that had become a touchstone throughout their marriage. "Not a single one," Xavier answered without hesitation. "You?" "None. Only gratitude for every moment, every choice that led me here to you." They sat together under the vast Arizona sky, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from their connection. The journey that had begun with laughter and doubt on a winter train platform had led to more happiness and fulfillment than either had dreamed possible. Inside the house, lights glowed warmly, promising comfort and rest. Beyond the house, the ranch spread out in the darkness, solid and enduring. And beyond the ranch, Jerome clung to the mountainside, the town where they had made their mark, where their legacy would endure long after they were gone. Xavier pulled Sophia closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder, fitting against him as perfectly as she had 43 years ago. The night was gentle, the air carrying scents of pine and sage. This was home, this place, this man, this life they had created together. "Right on time," Xavier murmured, echoing his words from that first meeting. "Right on time," Sophia agreed and felt the truth of it resonate in her bones. Everything had unfolded exactly as it should, bringing her to exactly where she belonged. They remained on the porch long into the night, two souls intertwined, watching over the life they had built together and feeling nothing but gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. The future remained uncertain as it always was, but they would face it together, the way they had faced everything. Hand in hand, heart to heart, partners until the very end and beyond.